All right, welcome back, guys. You're still watching Rubbin Minds, and we're still talking politics, and I have two special guests here to talk some more specifically about issues with both parties now. And I have here from Gen Voices, the convener, Zila Karewe. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Nwachuku Anyagalu. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Ebuka.
So we want to talk parties now and their manifestos, and it's something that from the last guests we also had here when we're talking about the debates. People are looking for issues. How are these things going to be achieved? What are these people? What do they even stand for, really? You know, most people don't even know what these parties' manifestos are about. Sure. So let's start with you, Zil. Let's talk about the APC. Let's start with the APC now. What are they offering in particular with things like with the economy? Let's start with the economy.
Let me speak broadly.
Yeah.
Going through both parties' manifesto, that of APC sounds a lot more like the personal statements of their candidates, as opposed to a party's structural move to make a change. So the truth is, looking at them side by side, it looked as if you needed to hold on to an individual for that of APC as opposed to a structure for that of PDP. And then one of the reasons that we're really keen and asking people to really dig into things like the manifesto is because it's not just the president or the head of state or whatever that you're voting in. You're voting in his party with the party structure, with the ideology. So even if the president, the presidential candidate of a party makes a promise, whatever that promise is, he will need to fund it for it to become reality. And funding it means he has to put it in the budget. Putting it in the budget means the Senate, the House of Assembly, has to approve it. So if it's outside what the party intends, then you're going to have a lot of confusion. So we need people to go a lot deeper into that. So that's just to answer why we looked at the whole manifesto thing.
It's interesting you bring all of that up, because a lot of Nigerians have always said that there seems to be no difference between both parties. Is there really a difference between both parties?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ebuka. I mean, I think on some level there is, because, for example, there's a very clear policy statement within the PDP manifesto to focus on privatization. And I think that's actually been pursued in this administration quite aggressively. However, in the APC manifesto, there's less emphasis on that. There's more emphasis on public-private partnerships, where there is, in fact, government involvement. And there's also perhaps more social welfarist, programs proposed, such as the 5,000 naira to the 25 million poorest families. But I do agree with your assertion there that actually there's not that much substantial difference, and that's partly, in my view, or in our view, because the level of developmental issues that are being tackled, they're basic. So I mean, whether you're APC or PDP, you've got to fix roads. You've got to rehabilitate hospitals. You've got to, sort out security, and so they cut across. They're not partisan issues, and typically, in the more advanced economies.
But then it could also come in with the way they want to pursue these things.
The how.
The how, exactly.
Yes,
that
yes.
maybe could be where the difference comes in.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because actually that's one area where both manifestos are, disappointingly deficient, in that there's a lot of talk about the what, which, as we've just said, is going to be pretty similar given where Nigeria is in its developmental journey. But there's very little emphasis on how, the strategies and the activities to support those strategies. So, for example, if you're going to fix tertiary education, there are many ways of skinning that cat. Are you going to support making universities autonomous, for example, where they become self-funding, and therefore students who go to universities pay fees? That's actually the position that Gen Voices, proffers, advocates. We believe that universities should be paying, but that rather than funding universities' operations, federal government should fund scholarships for the brightest students and student loans for those who don't do as well to get scholarships. So that way, they're not wasting money on the bureaucracy, running a bureaucracy of a university.
I know there's a lot of other parties, so I'm sorry if we're not talking about all of them, because, I mean, we have two major parties here.
Yes.
And he's mentioning the privatization and the PPPs and all of that. When you look at both manifestos, what jumps out to you from them?
Whoa.
Does anything interestingly jump out?
Yes, some things do jump out, but I'm going to have to tone it down so that I don't sound partisan.
Okay.
But I would tell you that just on the site of it, maybe I shouldn't mention which,
Okay.
one party's manifesto is almost 40 pages, and another is maybe 12, 15. Yeah. So that would just give you some idea. The depth of one party has a lot more depth in their manifesto. But one thing that I do know is what Wanchuku said. The basic infrastructure for us as a country is lacking, and their manifestos, none of them has really tackled building from what is non-existent. So if you look at any budget or any plan, you have to have a certain amount of money and know how far that money will go and how many people it will cover. Now, there's something the government has that's terribly deficient, which is an accountability of citizens. If you pick the average Nigerian who does not have a passport and does not have a driving license, chances are he does not exist in any database. So how do you account for him? How do you plan for growth? How do you want to plan for education? How many students are going to leave primary school this year into secondary school next year? No, so that basic infrastructure of citizen accountability isn't there. So you look at what's been going on in the north with Boko Haram, so many bombed, so many died. You never see names. You know, you never see names, just numbers, and those numbers always get disputed. I don't see how that, for any planning, both parties need to say, look, we're going to have this type of accountability, whether via a census or whether via registration or whatever it is, we're going to know with at least a 90% accuracy who's doing what, where, house addresses and things like that. So that's deficient in both parties' manifesto.
But having said that, we did identify some hits, what we call the hits and the misses for both parties, and maybe we'll just focus on the hits so that we make
No,
it.
we can do both.
We keep it positive. All right. So for PDP, we had some good hits. First of all, as a general point, they made a clear distinction between objectives and strategies, where they did the few places where they didn't talk about strategies. They clearly identified. They did say that they would ensure that, or the manifesto says they'd ensure that Nigerians with proven integrity, qualification, and track record are appointed to the judiciary. Okay. That's a very important thing. And then, of course, they talk about diversification from oil. On the APC side, popular one with us was they said they would amend the constitution to enable states and local governments to run their own police force. Again, we think that's...
I don't think a lot of people know that, though. That's a very, very interesting point there.
That's a very, for us, policing is a community issue, and therefore, the notion of a federal police right down to the local government level is just, laughable. It's something that is a legacy of the Civil War, the aftermath of the Civil War, and we need to move away from that. States need to be empowered because governors should be held accountable for security in their states. I mean, if you have a breakdown of law and order in your state, as the chief security officer for that state, you failed in one of your fundamental objectives. But today, governors can say, well, you know what? I don't control my police force. I don't control the budgeting for it. I don't control the planning. So you can't really blame the current governors for any security lapses. And that should change, because that should be a major campaign issue.